Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. I'm going to do a podcast with Chris James again today, my friend from Ontario, my favorite cable guy, and my favorite Canadian musician, other than my brother, perhaps I should say. Okay. and you suggested that we do a podcast about eugenics because I relatively recently made a video about a book that I read by G.K. Chesterton called Eugenics and Other Evils, and I believe it was written sometime in the early 20th century, and it was like basically it was considered a radical book at its time because he was one of the rare intellectuals who was really against eugenics. And it was a really interesting book because it went into detail about how deeply and widely it was accepted in North American culture for such a long time, like people being sterilized, and most people approved of that. And most high school textbooks taught eugenics as legitimate science. And what was that? I forget what that pseudoscience was called. You know, that skull measuring stuff? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like the size of your brain, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like how black people have these marks on their skulls that make them inferior or some shit like that.
Yeah. I know what you're talking. I just don't know what the name of it is. The
I forget what it's called, but isn't it called phonetics? Something like that. I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look up like skull measuring science. But
I would believe it. It sounded like, you know.
Oh yeah, phrenology.
Phrenology.
It's called. Yeah. Anyway, you had mentioned that you wanted to discuss this topic because one of your sons has Down syndrome. So if we lived in a culture where eugenics was still practiced, he probably would be sterilized because he would be considered inferior, right? So that's why this is such an interesting topic, because people who are more widely accepted by society today used to be seen as inferior. And it kind of makes you think about how you define the concept of what makes someone inferior and like what should be done about it if it is the case, and how much that really is the case or not. And you were just talking just before we started this too, that, and I said it would be interesting to talk on the podcast about that Joe Rogan podcast episode that we both recently watched with Eric Weinstein. So I'm sure a lot of people are aware of that and have seen that. So what did you think about it overall? Because I know you said it seemed like a shit show.
Yeah, I don't know. I find Eric fascinating. I've listened to a few of his Clubhouse chats, and I think I've seen every time he's been on Rogan, but like the last time he was on was, I don't know, a disaster to me. A lot of it was like, he really went off the rails when he had the pulitupjamie.com. Do you remember that part?
Oh yeah. Well, can you remind me of the details of that? It was something about where some people made some fancy visual about his weird scientific explanation thing about Gauss gravity or some shit like that he was getting into last time he was there. Is that what it was about?
Yeah, see, and you're proving my point already, is that okay, so he's basically like giving Joe a present, and it was like he had come up all these theories and videos to explain all of these, I guess things that he's found, to sum it up kind of stupidly, all these things that he's found within science that, is like his leaving a mark on the earth. You know what I mean? Like if you were to die, this is what he would like present, or something like along those lines. But anyway, he had a terrible time explaining it. And Joe kind of like was like, buddy, because he wanted to go right into he wanted to go right into like the video part. and Joe was like, you can't do that because people are listening. And one of the smartest guys on the planet doesn't put two and two together that he's going on a podcast that most people listen on audio, right? Especially now they switched over to Spotify. Like, I don't think people,
I still watch the videos, but that's I know that's a rare thing for podcasts in general, that most people just listen to them.
Yeah, well, I think it was more like when he was on YouTube, I think more people were watching the video. I know I was watching more of the video because the YouTube app and YouTube is everywhere, right? It's just easy. It's on your phone, whatever. But Spotify, well, first of all, they like, I don't really fault them because at the same time they're kind of going through this beta phase where they're trying to test out their video software, because Joe's like the first guy for them to kind of be on a video platform, right? So, but nobody watches the video is what I'm getting at. So the whole project that Eric, and I feel bad, like he had this whole thing and Joe kind of shot him down on the podcast, and this is apparently his life's work, and he was giving it as like a gift to Rogan, hence the pull it up jamie.com address. And it's I don't know, the conversation was a mess. He didn't go anywhere. He had trouble explaining himself, and I think it's just because I've heard him say a few things on I've heard a few conversations with him on Clubhouse where he totally like knocks it out of the park. And
okay.
Different subjects, obviously, but I don't know if it's just like that's where he feels comfortable. But I don't know. It was probably the worst interview that he's done with Rogan.
I felt that's interesting. I think it seems to me like maybe what you're talking about there is one aspect that seems common with both him and his brother Brett Weinstein, that they're so fucking nerdy that they don't know how to explain these really complex scientific theories to people in ways that they can actually understand them. Like, you see, the Gauss theory metric is usually measured this way. And like, what the fuck is the Gauss theory metric or whatever the hell you're talking about?
Yeah. No, both guys are brilliant. And you're right. They're so smart that, and I subscribe to Brett on YouTube, and so his clips come up every once in a while, and I'll watch some of them, but I don't last too long, to be honest, because they're very dry and boring. He's the type of guy that needs kind of like a Brian Callen or a Joe Rogan kind of like humor to interject some of that so that it would come across more, easy and absorbable to the normies. Yeah. So, but both guys are brilliant. Yeah. But yeah, I just thought that, I know that you had posted that you had on Twitter or something like that you had watched it. So I actually watched it that night, on the night that we were supposed to originally do this podcast, and I fell asleep. But yeah, it wasn't his best like interview, that's for sure.
So what I thought, to me, the most interesting part of it, and honestly, this isn't because it is a part that reflects that well on Eric Weinstein either, but I thought Rogan was making a way better argument than him when Eric Weinstein was basically making this standard argument that people make, that everything can be objective, everything is objective, and Joe Rogan was talking about how, well, there are some things that are really subjective, like if you say what the best movie is, like, who can say objectively what the best movie is, even if you believe in some aspects of objective reality, like the forces or like the laws of physics or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree way more with that perspective myself. I'm even less certain than Rogan is about objective reality and objective truth.
Yeah, the truth debate that could go on. We could spend the whole podcast doing that, man.
Yeah. I've spent many hours debating about this.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with some of my Christian friends who are more just as certain about truth as I used to be when I was a militant atheist.
Yeah, no, I come from a very Roman Catholic family, and my mom and dad, these debates about truth have been had. And once you interject like Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris into this as well, which they did that podcast. And I think, it goes on forever. But what I wanted to say was I agree with you about Joe having a better sense of like objective, especially when it comes to the arts. Because I think he's more of an artist than Eric, right? Eric's like this brainy guy he plays guitar, awesome, right? But he's not like a guy that's writing songs. Whereas Joe has that kind of creative. He has a portion of his brain that has that creative, kind of seed or whatever. Because he's a comedian, so he has that creative part to come up with different comedic lines and that kind of stuff. So I think he would understand how different art, movies, comedy, music can be, viewed differently through. Yeah, everybody. Like I understand that because like I have the most strangest taste when it comes to music. Like I can list you 10 bands I listen to and nobody would like them. Same with like movies and documentaries and that kind of stuff. I'm often the contrary in that, likes and dislikes different movies and when everybody loves them but
Yeah, that's a little, that's a good point. Exactly. Like that's I don't remember whether I mentioned that or not. I was thinking about mentioning that to you, or I did mention that to you when I commented on it initially. I was thinking about how, because I'm an artist too, because I write fiction, and I think that as an artist, as you said, you can have an easier time understanding how subjective what you like in terms of forms of entertainment and art that you enjoy, how subjective that can be. Like, people can like things that I think are terrible and vice versa, and it doesn't really matter. Even if there is objective reality and objective laws of physics and all sorts of objective truth all over the place, it's not necessarily the case that you can make like as Eric Weinstein was saying, that there is an objective good aspect of music, like this one harmony that applies to all of the greatest songs in the world. Like, that's kind of the point that he was making, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, they've done studies though. I mean, there's different chords and those kind of things that if you put them all together, people are more will get into easily. Like a majority of pop songs and hip hop songs these days use a certain BPM that is easily accessible for the brain to get into. There's a while there where like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, all those people were written by like two Swedish guys who basically wrote, all those songs, and they were like all structured and based on chord progressions and harmonies that people would like automatically get into and love, right? But
actually, can I ask you about that? Because like, I've played a little bit of guitar before. Like, by that I mean that I've started to learn to play guitar and then kind of just stopped practicing for a long time. I've done that like 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard like before about like people like Tim Ferriss, for example, talking about how like so many songs just use the same, I think it's the same 4-chord progression, like every AC/DC song uses it or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, a majority of rock songs are standard tuning. It's E, G, F, D, in those kind of order. So, and yeah, it's they're a lot of Kiss songs, same thing. They're all the same kind of. Same with Nirvana. If you look at Kurt Cobain, any live stuff, he's pretty much just taking this formation where you're like doing bar chords, right? But he's just like sliding it up and down the frets and that kind of stuff. So a lot of power chords, a lot of bar chords make up a majority of rock chords or rock songs. But yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't mean, but like to what I think you're probably about to get at there, like that doesn't mean that you can just like feed some data into a computer and have an AI write the perfect song that everyone likes, right?
Yeah, although you know what's funny that you mentioned that shit. I just was reading, and now I just read the headline. I didn't go into the article at all, but I was just reading a headline earlier on some tech website that apparently they have an AI computer that's took all the all of Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse. They took all of their songs and they created new songs based on like what kind of speed they do, what kind of chord changes they use, what kind of harmonies they vocalize and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so AI is able.
So, is that different from a remix? Is it like a really sophisticated remix, making it into an entirely different sounding song?
I don't know. I should have read the article, but
Okay.
I assume it's something like they're just. It was new songs. That's what it said in the headline. So, as far as what they sound like, who knows, right? But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Because myself personally, I don't use any of those.
If they're remixes, a lot of people do remixes, but I don't know how easy or hard it is to do. I mean, I know some people who can do it, but I've never done it myself before.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say everything is kind of a remix of something, right? I mean,
yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Majority of pop music, even if you go back to like Beatles, Zeppelin, those guys, Dylan, they were, taking it off of Elvis. Elvis was taking it off of, it goes on.
And there are literally some early heavy metal guitarists who literally copied their riffs off of classical music too.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul Simon, Garfunkel, they wrote Paul Simon said that he took a majority of some of his chord changes from like gospel music back in the day, how they would do their harmonies. He would strum it out on guitar, and that's how he came up with like Bridge Under Troubled Water and that kind of stuff. So everybody kind of steals from everybody. And going back to how we originally got on this topic is there's only a certain amount of chords, right?
Right.
There's not like 40,000 chords. Well, I don't know what the exact number is, but I know on a guitar, there's only a certain amount. There's like, your G, and then there's a major and minor. And then you can have different variations of that, like a G minor seventh or G minor the third or something like that. But it's still kind of in the key of G. There's E, G, B, D, E, F, right? There's only a certain amount of chords. So there's only within the music and rock and realm, I guess, well, now with pedals and technology, you can do pretty much crazy shit. But there once was a time where if you're just doing regular rock chord progressions on a guitar and standard tuning, it's you're more likely to come up with something that somebody's already came up with, right? And I go through this all the time when I'm trying to write songs. I'll start somewhere and I'll be like, oh shit, this sounds like Oasis, and then boom, I no longer tread down that path anymore. So yeah.
Okay.
Me, when I write songs, I don't do any. I'll tune my guitar in different tunings. I'll put a capo in a weird spot. I'll try to get away from standard tuning as much as possible, because I know that there's all those rock chords kind of sound the same. So if I can and I use a lot of effects on my pedals too. If I can, make my guitar sound like a sound that nobody else has come up with before, then I'm good with that. I also I try to stay away from like verse chorus in writing my songs. Some songs are just like a pure 2-minute verse, and then it breaks down, and you know what I mean. I'm always trying to get out of that blueprint, I guess, for songwriting.
Yeah, well, like you were just saying, it's hard to create something original, right? Like you were saying too, I've noticed, I don't know, pretty much every time I write fiction, I unintentionally copy a lot of the different influences on myself, but most of what I write is just about violent killers killing people and killing each other, and I watch lots of violent movies and read lots of violent books, so it's hard not to get influenced by that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm the same. I'm totally influenced by the people that I look up to as musicians, and they keep me going and that kind of stuff. So yeah. But yeah, you're a product of your environment too. Like I grew up on listening to my parents' records, and my dad liked Supertramp. My mom loved like Carly Simon, right? So I play in a rock band, and I try to write as hard as possible, but I really have to strain myself because like my bass line for me, and I have some songs that I'm gonna be releasing soon. It's real like I'm a mellow dude, I like not slow stuff, but AM radio is where I kind of like to tread. But yeah,
I heard I liked your song that you sent me before after we did that after you, Jenkins, and Dusty and I did that podcast about music, basically.
Yeah, I think I sent you a YouTube video that we did, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was fun. That was cool. So yeah.
So let's get into the topic.
Eugenics?
Yeah.
There's it's I've gone down the rabbit hole. Obviously, like you mentioned earlier, I have a son with Down syndrome. So there's so much to eugenics. You could go down, the Holocaust and Nazis. You could talk about modern day eugenics, which I would argue is not comparable to what the Nazis were doing, but it's not pretty close, but the numbers aren't really the greatest. Like a lot of European countries right now, for example, if you're 3-6 months pregnant, depending on what trimester you're in, and the baby's found to have Down syndrome, that will definitely get brought up to the mother. And the stats are like 90%, 95% of these babies are then aborted at that time. I think there's Iceland, Sweden, Finland, if I'm not mistaken, but there was about three to five countries over the last decade or so that have come out with, like Iceland for sure had 0 babies born with Down syndrome. And one 2018, 2017, one of those years. But
oh wow,
yeah, they're actually and promoting it proudly, which I mean it's it's an interesting conversation to be had. I try to separate my bias. Obviously it's there's an emotional tie to me to hear, you know what I mean? But I try to see it as like, it's a tough one. It's, if you're a young mother and this is the first child that you've had, and, I've often had this conversation with my own head. If I was brought, like we had a test for ours, just real quick here. We had a test, my wife did, and nothing came up. And then we didn't find out until he was actually born that, so he had Down syndrome. For me, I don't know. I had like 2 minutes of like anger, and then that was it. And I haven't been angry ever since. And it wasn't like angry. It was just like, I didn't know how to react, I guess you would say. But
angry like that this happened, or angry for your son?
Yeah, I don't know. I see it as more like I don't know. I was angry at like the world, like fate. I remember like coming home and just being like, throwing shit around our shitty house for a while. And then my wife was still at the hospital at the time, and then I would then that was it. Like I had like a moment. It was like, honestly, it was like, I want to say maybe a few hours. And then I was just like, what am I doing? This is going to be my buddy. This is going to be my best friend. And then ever since, I've never, I've had times where I've been frustrated because it's not the easiest thing. You know what I mean? Like, my son's going to be 11, 12. And he just like, for the first time, he's just started showering by himself. Right. So,
okay.
It's a long, and like it's amazing. We're like, fuck yeah, he's showering. He comes out and we still have to rinse off the soap and stuff like that because he missed some spots like that. But this is most people, they shower their kid till they're like, 6 or 7, and then they're done with it, right? And then the kid takes over from there. So there's just stuff that we have to do to, it's just more work, and there's things that obviously he won't, you know what I mean? That I kind of like, will he drive a car someday? I don't know. Maybe, because technology the way he's going, but I'm always like, throwing these things around in my brain. And I knew all this was coming. The day that we had, we found out, I was like, I knew that my life was going to be different, and I knew that it was going to be a lot of work, a lot of struggle, and a lot of like joyfulness too, right? So if you're a mother and, the doctor hands you the slip where it says that, your kid has Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or any, life, maybe he's born with one leg, who knows, right? There's like, there's so many things that could go wrong here. I don't know. I'm semi-sympathetic to, the mother's choice there. So, yeah. And that leads us to like a whole, and we don't have to get into like abortion or anything like that.
Yeah,
but,
that's what I was just thinking about too, actually.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. That's actually an interesting implication, because, I mean, it's like it depends on, like, depending on your political interpretation of the subject, you might see it as a similar sort of thing. Like if you have a more stereotypical conservative view on the subject, you might see abortion as equivalent to eugenics, but it's a more complex situation than that to me. Like, well, that gets into like, how apparently there's some early gene editing stuff that can happen too. Like if you can edit, if you could edit Down syndrome out of your son before he was born, would you do that? Is it possible that there could be consequences, since there are all these science fiction movies and books and TV shows about how the progress of evolution and tampering with human life is a cautionary tale, and we should be cautious when we're manipulating our genetics because there could be unforeseen consequences.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I've had this argument back and forth. For me, on a personal note, I ultimately think that one day abortion and kind of this practice of eugenics that we currently perform in modern day, I think all these things, like technology, will kind of figure all this out for us eventually. I think there will be one day that, as soon as you like, as soon as you have sex with a girl and do your thing inside of her, that you'll know that minute whether it's gonna have blue eyes or size 6 shoes or something like that, right? Like I think our technology will be that good. and at that moment, I think there will be a grace period before the heartbeat gets going, before second, third trimesters get going, for your husband, wife, whatever, 2 guys, 2 girls, whatever your situation is, to kind of go through that and go, okay, let's talk this out, right? My issue is that, I've read stories of like second, third trimester abortion, or like abortion after the woman has had the child and, it's Down syndrome, and then they gets aborted after that. Like when the babies come full term, and I know we're getting into abortion already on this topic, but it's hard not to talk about it without talking about abortion.
It's relevant.
It is, right? Like, and yeah, second, third trimester abortions. And, I think we've done studies on this, and polls show that people that once you get into the second and third trimester, as far as abortions go, people are more likely to go, I don't know, right? Because, yeah, they're fully developed and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. Well, this reminds me too. I was like having a conversation that I want to explore this further with my Orthodox Christian friend Shane, who I've talked with many times on this channel, and like he and his Christian friend, who were talking to Reed, who from Mixed Mental Arts, and his friend Nathan, who they both do street epistemology on their channels, like that thing in that book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. that
Yeah,
we talked
James
about.
Lindsay and Peter
Yeah,
Boghossian.
James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, they do that sort of thing. So both of them and I basically were all mostly asking questions about their worldview that life begins at conception. So
Mhm.
I wanted to, and I hope this will eventually happen, have further conversations with Shane and Justin, or even just Shane, about how, okay, so if life begins at conception, which it scientifically does not, maybe if in theory it metaphysically does, or something like that, then why doesn't it begin before conception? Like, is it like, apparently abortion is bad because it's interfering with God's plan? Okay, so then have I committed mass genocide every time I've masturbated or used a condom or fucked a chick when she's on birth control or gotten a blowjob and wasted my seed, so to speak?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I mean, I think, well, I think science is pretty settled on this too. When the sperm enters the egg is actually when life, you know what I mean? It's the,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's when, a majority of scientists and a majority of Christians or whatever religion you would choose to pick, I think that's when they would say that's when life, actually starts, is when the sperm, and the egg, and that splits from 1 to 2 cells and so on, right? I think that's when life actually begins.
Mm-hmm. And then, but then, like, I should say too, like, I also agree, like I was saying earlier, it's a complex subject because, like,
It is.
like you were saying earlier, it's apparently, I have not thoroughly researched this. Apparently, it rarely happens that there are late term abortions, and sometimes you have to choose between the life of the mother and the child, and I don't think that it's going to be that the decision is going to be always the one way or the other, and that should be up to, like, the woman and her significant other, if she has one. And, like, it shouldn't be our business what they decide in terms of that. But then, like, there can also be late trimester abortions that like ones you alluded to there, that sound particularly fucking gruesome, and like they were totally unnecessary. So this can, like, the conservatives do still kind of have a point, even, which is why, like, I say that instead of using this like ideological language on both sides, I think it is, to either call yourself pro-life or pro-choice. I say that I'm pro-abortion, but that doesn't mean that I'm 100% pro-abortion, because most people are talking about abortion when they're talking about pro-life or pro-choice.
Yeah, the abortion one is that's I've proclaimed myself on either side of the fence over the years. I've been both pro-life and pro, and it's one to this day that I don't even like those labels. Like, I don't know what I am. I don't know if I consider myself pro-life or pro-choice, because I could be both depending on what day you ask me. And I know people would say, "Oh fuck, Chris, you're flip-flopping," but yeah, I don't know. I think two things can be true at once. I think one, obviously, we shouldn't be aborting fetuses at second and third trimesters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I also think that, especially men throughout history have been pretty dominant as far as controlling women's bodies and women's rights, right? Like, women had the right to vote only a breath ago, as far as history goes, right? It was like 1800s, if I'm 1850 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, the right to vote. Or anyway,
Yeah, I don't remember the exact year.
and abortion laws even later than that. I think Roe versus Wade is in 80s 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway,
I think something like that. Yeah.
we're super late in history, though. It's not like these laws came into effect in 1200.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as, if you look at throughout history, men have pretty much dominated and controlled women's bodies and their choices of life for so long, that for us to go and backpedal on that now, you know what I mean? I lean more towards a women's right to choose. So I'm torn. I'm pro-life because I have a son that has Down syndrome, and I obviously don't like any of those people to be born, but I also understand a woman's right to her body and her choice. So yeah, I don't know. If you were to say what are you, pro-life or pro-choice, I'd probably say it's complicated, That's my answer.
Yeah. See, like if I graded myself on some sort of a spectrum, I would say that I'm mostly pro-choice, but this is actually like one of the few things that I kind of actually agree with Dave Rubin about, and I disagree with like 95% of what he says. But the one thing that I can remember that he said in his terrible, lazily written book that I read was that he's reluctantly pro-choice, and I kind of understand that perspective, because I think that overall the fact that it should be the woman and, like I said, her significant other, if she has one, it should only be their decision, and it's not really our business as to whether they have the child or not. I think that trumps everything else. But yes, I understand that you can see, if you see this in a certain way, you can see it as murder. And if you see it that way, I understand why someone would see that as fucked up. So I could it sounds like you're even more the case this way than me, but I can understand both sides of the argument.
Yeah, same here. I'm not, and you know what? I think height and moral foundations theory helps a lot here as well. If you can understand both sides of the argument here, like the choice and the life, the pro-choice, the pro-life argument that even Hunter made on his episode with Rogan, when he talked about how conservatives are, they're more pro-life when it comes to abortion. Democrats are more pro-choice on gun rights. It flips. So they're more pro-choice when it comes to guns. Democrats are more pro-life, right? So, but I think that helps to understand the abortion debate too, especially when it comes to women's rights and their right to choose what happens to their body. Again, like I'm sympathetic to both sides of the argument. There's there's a lot there, and the stats aren't good for abortion, unfortunately. You know what I mean?
Really?
Well, if you look at like who's getting aborted the most, unfortunately, it's Black children.
Well, I mean that's but
like healthy white.
Tell me what you think about this argument, or maybe you've heard it before. In the have you read the Freakonomics books?
No, but they're my list of like books to read.
In the I think it's in the first one. They talk about how they did some sort of economic study that found that after the passing of Roe v. Wade, 20 years later, in the same environments which are the areas where people got the most abortions, which were like lower class, high crime areas with disproportionate numbers of minority people, that those were the type of people who got the most abortions. But the passing of Roe v. Wade and more people getting abortions also coincided with something like 20 years later in those same neighborhoods with those same families, there being a dramatically lowered crime rate because children were not born who would have been very much more likely to have grown up to commit crimes. I think that's a really interesting theory that they posit in that book. And I don't know if I totally agree with it, because it kind of sounds like exaggerated in a few ways to me, potentially. So I understand why a few people have criticized it, but I think it's really interesting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is interesting, and I've never heard that stat before, but that makes, I mean, it's somewhat I mean, I'd have to look at the numbers, but it makes sense to me right off the
basically in the book, if I remember correctly, they were saying like, this is how you make a right-wing case for abortion, because it's like this reduced crime, basically.
Yeah. It's Yeah, I don't have any argument against that. I mean, what's the flip side to that? I mean, all those, if there's no crime or there's less crime and all these babies are getting aborted, we don't know if those babies would have, committed a crime, or if they would have gone on to become the next Michael Jordan
Exactly.
or the next Tiger Woods, right? So
Exactly.
um
Exactly. That's a reasonable criticism of it, because to say, like, you can't say with 100% certainty that those people, those unborn babies, would have grown up to become criminals. And like, see, like, one of the ways that I've changed from when I used to be a militant atheist is that I'm not a determinist anymore. So that's kind of too much of a deterministic outcome for me to say that, like, objectively every single one of, or even most of, those people would have committed crimes. Like, they those crimes could have been committed by other people even too. It's not necessarily like, even if all of them in even if most of the people who committed crimes in that area were from there could have been, like, some of them from other areas who could have committed more crime, and like, they could have filled in the gap with the people who were there who were committing less crimes. I mean, there's so many factors that you have
yeah,
to
that's it.
consider that could affect that.
There's so many factors you're not even thinking about. You could have a police chief in one of those decades that comes in and that's like really close with all those boys that would have been aborted, and then becomes their best friend and teaches them the way, and then they just become amazing people for their community, right? Or it could go the
Yep.
opposite way. You could have a dick of a principal at all the school that they attended to, and
Yep.
then they start a gang and become the Bloods and the Crips, and then they fuck up the whole entire area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, yeah, there's so many factors there that there's too many unknowns there to know for certain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just back to the abortion thing. I think like what I was saying is this. Sorry, like a majority of this, like if a mother finds out she's gonna have a healthy baby that's gonna be blonde haired, blue eyes, she's not getting an abortion, right? Like a majority of
Probably,
a
yeah.
majority of abortion, unfortunately, are Down syndrome, spinal bifida, those kind of very bad diseases where they're born with like no backbone, or paraplegic, or anything like really severe like that. And poor, often mothers, and not just black but different other cultures, white. I'm sure the Appalachian Kentuckians have a high abortion rate
Mm-hmm.
there too, right?
Yeah, it's not just a race issue, it's a
It's
class
not,
issue.
yeah, it's a class
Yeah.
issue. It's a class issue. You're right.
Yeah.
So, and this is just mothers that can't obviously afford to raise a child, and if they're just working Walmart part time or whatever their situation is, right? So, the stats aren't. Yeah. You can't. It's hard not to. And I knew abortion was going to get brought up tonight. It's hard not to dive into eugenics without hitting the abortion kind of bell on the way in.
Yeah,
because they tie. Yeah, especially when you talk about modern day, not so much like Nazi eugenics.
Yeah, that's just like the most attractive, well, not attractive, but like the most infamous examples that people can think of.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because eugenics on the surface, I mean, the definition is to eliminate a race based on lack of I think it's actually intelligence, or if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that. Or
And
lack of ability in some way too.
Yeah,
the idea is that they're inferior, and they're like they're inferior to regular people. So what's the need for them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a mix of both. It's based on intelligence, or based on just like but what I was going to say is that, like, the Nazis, for example, they practiced eugenics on the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are like, they're one of the most, like, if you look at intelligence,
Yeah,
I think it's Ashkenazi Jews are some of the most
yeah,
intelligent people. And Eric Weinstein, to loop all this conversation together, he's Jewish. I don't know
yeah.
if he's of that culture, but it's just funny that the Jews have been persecuted a lot throughout history. And this isn't like they're not known for being. I don't have another way to describe it other than they're not known for being dumb people, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have Jewish people hating me.
Unless you're like Seth Rogen.
Yeah, man, that guy is like.
He's smart in some ways, though. Like,
But he's such a guy
for,
that he's such a
smart
guy to me
creative.
that I used to love, and like I used to love all of his movies. But recently, what he's been doing, and I don't know if did you witness the whole Jonathan Kay and Godsod thing that went down with him and Seth Rogen and shit.
I heard something about it, but I really have basically no idea what it was about.
Anyway, like I still like Seth Rogen, but I used to like that guy was like, he was like Adam Sandler to me at a point where it's like anything that this guy comes out with movie wise, you know, Pineapple Express, I'm watching that shit. This guy's fucking hilarious. You know what I mean? And then over the last like 5 years, social media and just like his becoming really woke, he's just kind of went, you know, downhill for me.
Oh, I didn't even know that he's become woke.
Well, he fucking like not attacked, but he was super rude to Jonathan Kay for some reason.
Who is that? I don't even know who that is.
Oh, Jonathan Kay is like, well, to me, this is just my own personal opinion, but he's one of the best Canadian journalists we have.
Oh, okay.
He writes for Colette currently, Claire Lehman and all those people, and he does the podcast. He's a Canadian guy on Twitter though. But I think he used to write. He's been on CBC. He's been on TVO. He's been on all those things.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if he has a Substack, but he's a journalist. You can follow him on Twitter. But the perfect journalist, like to me, everybody was gonna say he's like right wing, which he's not. But he's not very partisan at all. He tells it like it is with truth. He's not really. I can't label him as either a Democrat.
Like what did Seth Rogen say about him?
So Jonathan Kay tweeted out that he used his dog shampoo in the shower instead of his regular shampoo.
Oh, I heard about that he was making fun of some guy for that. I didn't realize that it was that guy.
Yeah,
how is that like a going woke thing?
Not this incident is going woke. I think Seth Rogen is based on tweets. I think he's done other things that I think that have been kind of woke. I can't pull him up right now. Anyway, I wanted to stay on track with finishing the Jonathan Kay. So anyway, you said, how did you not know that was shampoo, you idiot, or something like that? Really stupid on Twitter, right? And Seth Rogen's got like 4 million followers, and Jonathan Kay's got like 30,000 or some shit like that, right? Okay. So I don't know. He just started picking on him, and then Godsod. I don't know. Do you know who Godsod is? He's been on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he's a Canadian evolutionary psychologist who studies business from an evolutionary psychology perspective. I've seen a lot of his podcasts. I know he's like sometimes considered part of the IDW crowd, and Dusty read his recent book where he's like, I know he's gone like super anti SJW, and that's part of why I used to be a bigger fan of his than I am now. I get that the SJW shit is fucked up sometimes, if people like make a whole career out of that sometimes, but I like his like actual intellectual work and discussions he has about evolutionary psychology. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer to that.
I actually met him in person once. I got a picture with him.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Yeah, it was like he was like on his way to take a piss, and I was like, "Oh, can I get a picture with you?" He's like, "Oh yeah, real quick, man." I'm like, "All right." Psh. Anyway, oh
cool.
And I like God, but I get what you're saying. He's like, he really cashes in on the anti-social justice warrior kind of, yeah. But anyway, he started chiming in. Where I'm going with this is he's chimed in on the Seth Rogen attack on Jonathan Kay about the dog shampoo and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And it was just weird that like Seth Rogen is a Hollywood actor and he's like taking on a Canadian professor and he's taking on a Canadian journalist. Like, do you have nothing better to do? And like calling him an idiot for like using dog shampoo accidentally, right? While he was taking a shower. Like, it was just really weird. And
should have smoked a joint before that tweet.
Yeah, and there's been a few things. I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but there's something else where that Seth Rogen did where I was like, oh man, really? Like I was disappointed in him for doing it. So anyway, where I started with this is like, yeah, I used to love Seth Rogen, but I don't know. Yeah, like I've said before, I have a love-hate relationship with everybody. So I still,
I get that. I like I can't think of a single person who I agree with about about absolutely everything. That's almost like something that scares me.
Yeah. No. Yeah, there's nobody I am like. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, even like fans, like people that I listen to podcast wise, you know, there's always something that they'll say. I'm like, oh no, I don't agree with that. You know what I mean? It's always like that.
Yeah, for me that applies to literally every person. Like even if I agree with most of what someone says, there are a few things that I disagree with, and I would say vice versa too. For the most part, like that's why there's almost no one who I just like trash as having no value whatsoever as a human being. Like there's nothing they can possibly say that I could ever agree with, and there's nothing redeeming about them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's probably some spicy topics like abortion or whatever, or I would definitely disagree with or agree with some people though. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you ever like get into it, or do you try to avoid those conversations?
With who? Like the average person?
Average person, or just friends and family when like abortion or race or anything like that gets brought up?
I usually, I think I'm just I have kind of an argumentative nature, so yeah. I don't avoid discussions like that. That's why I get into so many stupid fucking political arguments with my family member I've told you about before, who is like this stupid, boring stereotype of a woke progressive.
Yeah. You know what's interesting to me is, and you're one of these people, and so is Dusty, but I have a group of friends that I'll have any kind of conversation, just like we're having right now, where we've been talking about abortion, we talked about race a little bit, we talked about, really things that, in regular life, people don't really talk about, right? Mm-hmm. But what I find everybody has in common with some of the best conversations I have is they've all read The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
Not to bring up that book again, and it's my favorite book. We've had this conversation before, but if you've read that book, you are in that lane with me, and I can talk with you about any issue, whether it be like BLM, whether it be eugenics, whether it be like Chinese politics, history, women's rights, any gay rights, any like spicy hot topic. If you've read
a good example I bring up all the time too is religion, because my friend Shane Kennedy, my Orthodox Christian friend who I told you about, he gets like super fucking evangelistic about Christianity sometimes, but he like another way that I like that book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, changed my mind about militant atheism when I was a militant atheist, is that there are different ways that people approach life. People have different cultural values and different worldviews, and there's not necessarily anything inherently wrong with having whatever sort of beliefs around those that you want to have, as long as you don't use them as excuses to hurt other people, which is why it annoys me when people are militant atheists now, just as much as it annoys me when people are like being all religious fundamentalists like that too.
Yeah, and in some way, when you were talking there, I think this also helped me with COVID too, right? Like people have been like, some people have been really like crazy and haven't left their house, and they're wearing 3 masks and like gloves and a helmet when they're leaving to go grocery shopping, right? And then there's
I haven't seen that. Has that happened?
no, but I see people driving, and like I'm not like whatever masking, and I'm let's not get into that. But if for me, when I see people driving by themselves with a mask on, that's like my opportunity to be like, okay,
Yeah, like
that's a
that's
little bit
totally
silly.
unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there's people that go that far during COVID, but then there's also people that go the opposite and are like, testing the waters and not wearing a mask when they go inside Walmart and shit like that, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but like I'm sympathetic to both those arguments, and I think I got that from height, where I'm like I have enough space in my brain to know to be like, oh, I'm like pro-choice here with this, and you know what I mean. I'm not gonna, friends or family, and I've applied this in my regular life. Friends or family that come around my house, or whether if you wanted to get together through this pandemic, whatever like that. If you didn't want to and you want to stay home, or if you want to come over wear a mask and whatever, I'm like good to go either side. I'm not going to shame you in either way on this topic. We can, debate a little bit back and forth, but it's not like, you know what I mean? And so, going back to height and righteous mind, I think that's also helped me kind of through COVID as well, kind of, navigate the waters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know, like, again, like, I often when I get into like topics like abortion or eugenics or whatever, I often want to be like, have you read Jonathan Haidt's Righteous Mind? Like, you have to check that box for me before we go any further.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That reminded me too. I think I told Dusty this recently, but I didn't tell you. I got into after this guy commented on my video that I made about Nietzsche's book that I had just recently read called The Antichrist, and I called it Nietzsche was wrong about Christianity because as with most intellectuals and most people, like we were talking about, I like a lot of the points that Nietzsche makes, but now that I'm no longer a militant atheist, I think he sounds like an ignorant militant atheist when he talks about how harmful religion is. So I made a video about that, and then this guy who said he was a scientist commented on the video, and he was saying that and I mentioned Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory in the video, and he was saying that religion and science are incompatible because Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory has been debunked. And also, my own evidence from my personal experience of this is that I have worked with many different scientists who follow all sorts of different religions, and they have to leave their religion at home. And I was like, that's evidence that religion and science are incompatible. That sounds like evidence that they're compatible to me, because you can be a religious scientist and not have your religion affect what you do scientifically. Like,
yeah, and I think like I mean, if you're a fan of history at all, you kind of know that science started within Christianity. I mean, it was Aquinas and a lot of like priests and popes that first got into science. It's gone the opposite way now, where I would argue that a majority of scientists these days aren't have nothing to do with religion, right? Like,
yeah, probably.
You might find the odd like Candace Owens who's black and Republican, but a majority of those scientists are atheists, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that's probably true. And then there's some small distinctions too. Like there are scientists like who I used to be much bigger fans of, like Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss, because they were part of the militant atheist crowd. And then there are people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who has made the point many times before that he is an agnostic. And then there are some maybe evolutionary biologists I can think of in particular who were still Christian even though they believed in evolution. But
Mhm.
I think you're right that like in as far as I know anyway, it seems like most scientists are at the very least not religious, or they don't even think about it at all, or they're like atheist or agnostic or something.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of these conversations, and religion is another one for me. It's like there's pluses and there's kind of like a Taoist element here where there's a yin and a yang to like everything, right? There's a plus and minus to everything. Abortion, there's pluses and minuses, like you were saying earlier, with like there was less crime in this area for abortions, right? There's pluses and minuses, but at the same time you're killing people. That's the minus there. A religious fundamentalists would argue the same thing, but same with religion. There's plus and minuses to there. Yes, there's history of priests raping altar boys and doing horrendous things over,
Oh yeah.
and like the numbers are crazy, and the amount of lawsuits have cost millions and millions of dollars, and the Pope is corrupt and been paying all this at the same time.
Yeah,
But
like the Crusades and all sorts of other shit.
and all at the same time. But at the same time, I got two Christian parents still to this day, and like my dad is out giving clothing for Saint Vincent de Paul, and being way more or of a better person than me, right? So at the same time, it's like he's doing good, and he believes in this faith that allows that he does this good through. And there's a million people out there that do that same kind of work, right? So it's all this like it's always this like yin and yang. There's always plus and minus to like all these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
And one, it makes it fucking amazing to talk about, especially podcast and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I can I am sympathetic to both sides of the argument. And
yeah, totally. Like I totally agree with kind of what you were saying there about your parents too. Like back when I was a militant atheist, I was just kind of a dick to religious people, not like any random religious people, but people who were already friends or family members who I knew wouldn't like disown me if I questioned their essential moral worldviews. And like now I don't really care. And if it makes their life better, and often it seems like it does for most people, then that's a good thing. And like my mom has a lot of friends in her church, and her friends have helped us out with a lot of stuff, like even during the pandemic. So my mom doesn't have to go to the grocery store because she has so many serious health issues. A few of her friends from her church have bought groceries, and that's obviously a great thing for people to do. So who am I to have a problem with that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's I remember when like Hurricane Katrina hit like New Orleans and that kind of stuff, there was a bunch of churches that pitched in and kind of got everybody back up on their feet, right? And if it wasn't for like these religious communities, I'm sure it would have come together eventually, but it would have just taken longer. But yeah, there's some, for me, religion is more like, and this is like every kind of hierarchical structure within our society, is like the institutions run and they're run and predominated by human beings, by man predominantly. So you have like for example, Pope, Catholicism, the that whole like priesthood, that whole, you know what I mean? Since men control that and run that, it's way open for corruption and that kind of stuff. So the groups, these institutions are ran by our corrupt and evil, and that's where a lot of the negative lies. For me, it's the individuals, like, the mom, the dad, the brother, the whoever that goes to church, does all the good. It's the individuals themselves that actually bring out the good in religion. You know what I mean? And this is the same with the government. Government is like, all these institutions are corrupt, but you can find sprinkles and anecdotes of a good senator here, a good premier here, doing good and actually moving the needle. And you can find bad too, but it's like,
that's a really important point, actually. That's kind of exactly what I was just thinking about, that both like in terms of religion and government, it depends on the individual. Like I can think of those positive examples of religious people, as I mentioned, and I can think of negative ones too. Like I've had I've had a few bosses before who were religious, but they had some what I thought were kind of fucked up views. Like one of my bosses was he was against gay marriage, or he was like homophobic in some ways. He said he had this attitude. He was Catholic, and he had this attitude of, hate the sin, not the sinner. So I don't hate the person because they're gay. I hate the fact that they are gay. And then there was like I had another boss who was kind of like paying me under the table for some painting jobs, and he kind of tried to cheat me out of $1,000. So the only way I eventually got him to pay me was by guilt tripping him and saying, Jesus wouldn't approve of what you're doing right here.
Wow, so he was a religious guy, and he tried to cheat you out of money.
Yeah,
eh?
yeah.
Again, it's like I don't know. My mother.
Well, that's why, like
not
you said, it depends on the individual and what they use the religion for, and in terms of government, like what they use their power for. Like that's why, to me, I was telling you about how I forget who it was. I think it was maybe Rachel Notley, who's the NDP MP here for Alberta. So like, for people who aren't Canadian watching, like the equivalent of the official opposition leader for our provincial government. So they're not in power right now. The Conservatives are, but she was talking about how she wants more strict restrictions for COVID. And I was telling you that, man, this is fucked up, and I like some of what pretty much I like at least a few things of what pretty much almost every politician says, but I hate most of the rest of what they say. And it's not because like you were saying too, I'm not like an anti-lockdown person or an anti-mask person at all. I make sure to take a mask everywhere I go. And I mean, I just think though that, like me, it seems like a lot of people have like lockdown fatigue, as I've heard it described, where people want to see their friends and family members. And it seems like they're kind of starting to do that regardless of what you're doing in terms of lockdowns anyway. So.
Yeah, no, people here are kind of at their wits' end, and they're out doing their thing. But yeah, for me, like, just a little bit of Canadian politics. I really struggle with like, who would I vote for these days? You know what I mean? Like, there's been a lot of people that have really fucked up this year as far as their policies that they've.
Oh yeah.
Like I hear this I see this all the time, like no matter what state or what province you're in, your premier or your governor really fucked up this year. They really did a bad job getting at the vaccine. They really did a bad job with the lockdowns. They did a bad job with, going back to schools, all this shit. Even our local health guy here, that guy's been torn up and down, right, for this. So nothing works, lockdowns don't work, or they did work, or, they help stop the spread, or masks work, or they don't work, or, you know what I mean? That's all this back and forth. Nobody knows. I just,
and we were talking before we started this, I think, about how, it seems like more people are starting to get vaccinated. Like I'm getting vaccinated soon, and, like more and more people are starting to get vaccinated. So that will probably lead to way less cases, hopefully. So hopefully things can very slowly shift back to normal. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around, like I was saying earlier, Texas, which I know I got the flag in the background here, and not to pimp them at all. I was born there. That's why I have it up there. If anybody's wondering why the fuck Texas is.
I didn't even know that that's the Texas flag.
Yeah, it's a Texas.
Okay.
Texas flag. Well, yeah, like their cases have gone down. Actually, I watched the Blue Jays game the other day, and they played in a full stadium with like 40,000 people. Right? They set the.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was like
I saw the other day. I wasn't like watching the game, but I just happened to be walking by when it was on, and there were people in the stadium, but it was like. It was more full than it had been before when there were the crowd restrictions before, but it seemed like it was only still maybe half full or less than that.
Yeah. Yeah, they I've been just yeah, you know, I've been kind of following COVID shit, but yeah, Texas, their governor ended masks and lockdown policy that I want to say a month ago now. So
Okay.
the Rangers said, "Fuck it, let's sell every ticket in the stadium," and they had they had a sellout crowd,
Oh wow.
and it was the first time in North America that large of a gathering of people had gotten together in one place.
And did
The
a bunch
last,
of people get COVID?
well, the jury's still out on that one, but
Do we
we
do people know like if any of those people have been vaccinated?
yeah, I'm sure a majority of people like Texas and Florida. Like I know in Florida, if you want to get a vaccine, all you have to do is be 18 years and older, right? So they have
Oh right.
they have so many vaccines to give out that anybody can just go and get it. Whereas here in Ontario, you have to be 60 years of age or older. Like I can't get one right now because I don't, I'm a cis white male. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, there's an age limit right now.
Well, I told you I can only get one here at the end of the month because I have epilepsy, so I have like a chronic neurological condition. So I am of noble stature.
Yeah, so I won't be able to get vaccinated for a few, which is totally fine. Whenever they call my name, I'll gladly step in line. But I think like Texas and Florida, they've had their 30 and 40-year-olds vaccinated for a couple, maybe weeks, months now, right? So maybe a majority of those people at the stadium already had it because, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Even David Packman was saying that cases have gone down in the United States somewhere like 30% over the last couple
Oh, really?
months. Yeah, so cases have gone down in the States. Here in Canada, I don't like where I am right now, our cases have gone up weirdly. So
Yeah, they've gone up here too.
yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe this is something like Canada was never really hit that hard to begin with, right? So
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to say.
yeah, it is really hard to say. I don't know. I'm not an expert at all. And yeah, I just I don't know.
Yeah.
I with COVID for me, it's white. Do you know the whole white pill, black pill, red pill, blue pill kind of thing?
Yeah, I know Michael Malice talks about that a lot.
Yeah, that's right. He got it from Curtis Yarvin. Do you know that guy?
Oh yeah, that's some Mencius mold bug, the guy who some people say is like a founder of the alt-right, but he doesn't necessarily see himself that way.
Yeah, so good. I'm glad you know these people, just because like I love the red pill, white, and I know that Curtis came up with that whole thing, but as soon as you unfortunately mentioned Curtis's name, you're associated with some right wing, QAnon thing. But I
know who he is.
I know. Just all I did was I just used the red pill reference. That's all I'm doing here. But anyway, yeah, the white pill, black pill for COVID is like, is a good thing that like a majority of people that I know have lost so much faith in government, over the last year. So like, I think, well, I don't know about you, man, but like my faith in government this has been a well-known thing for me for years. Like I know government has been fucking done nothing but binge, because I'm a big pothead. Like I'm smoking weed right now. So I know how bad they were on pot for my whole entire life. Right. So I get that they wouldn't get COVID right,
Yeah.
right. And I got how stupid their laws were. And I got how stupid, I don't know, just like everything, man. You apply for citizen or whatever, your driver's license or anything to do with the government, they fuck everything up. Even like when we did legalize weed here and they opened up the shops, the licenses they gave to some people and didn't give to other people, they totally fucked up selling weed. Like the government couldn't even sell weed properly to people, right? So
yeah, it took them a while. It took them a while to figure that out.
Yeah. So when I get a majority of my people that are in my like Dunbar number, my 150, when I get a majority of those people that are just like, man, the government fucking just sucks at COVID, right? It's like, yes, finally, you guys, you know what I'm saying now about how the government sucks, right? So that's kind of like my white pill where I'm like, oh, this is the one good thing of that COVID has brought out.
even if you're like, regardless of how much your opinion on it is politicized, or how much you or how much you're a fan of lockdowns and masks or not, from all the way from like they should be worn everywhere always, and you should never interact with a single other person ever, to they're all bullshit and COVID is a hoax. Like, I think a lot of people could probably agree that one of the problems seems to be that there's not much consistency in what different governments in different parts of, like, at least in Canada anyway, what different governments in different parts of the country are doing, and when they're making more strict and less strict things happening, and how based on science it is or isn't. It's kind of debatable, and I think there are some good things that have happened and some bad things that have happened, like a lot of things that make no sense. Like, one of them that I don't remember whether I told you about or not is I've just stuck to doing workouts at home throughout the whole time during the pandemic. But and I used to go to the gym sometimes, but the gym that I used to go to, it's one of those businesses that closed permanently, and some of the other gyms opened up back in town, and they were doing like limited numbers there, but now they're not anymore. So the gyms are open and there aren't any limited numbers, and everyone still has to wear masks, and you're allowed to be crowded into a gym with a whole bunch of people working out, but you're not allowed to work out too hard now, because the treadmills only go up to a certain speed. You can't go past a certain speed because you can't be breathing too hard. Because, you know, if you're breathing with in a room with a whole bunch of other people, it's really going to make a difference in terms of how hard you're breathing.
Is that really a thing? Like, you can't go?
That's
really?
it.
You can't go?
Yes.
They've lit like the gym
is treadmill set, so you can't run with past a certain intensity.
Wow, that's unreal, man.
Yeah.
Although I shouldn't be surprised, we've like blocked off some of our lanes in supermarkets here. Like, you can't buy like makeup or something like that because it's not an essential product. Or
they did stuff like, I don't think they're doing that anymore, but they did that at first with the bulk food section in grocery stores.
No, they've done that
stuff.
They've done that here in Ontario, and even my wife got a massage today, and like the massage guy was telling her that he can go and get his hair cut, or he can go and give his hairdresser a massage, but that hairdresser, it's illegal for that same girl to give him a haircut.
That's funny.
So he can't
isn't it generally the case that both at massage places and at barbershops they wear gloves when they're touching your skin and your hair?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how many shops have you heard of that? How many first choices have fucking gone and had breakouts? I mean, sure, the odd one here or there. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah, the government putting these policies is like so ridiculous. Like, yeah, like only essential stores are. We're in complete lockdown right now in Ontario. It was just now, I think yesterday. So,
wow.
Yeah, you can't have
what does that mean exactly? Like, you can't go anywhere or do anything basically other than like maybe go to the grocery store?
No, you can go to the grocery store, but like some places aren't open at all. It's supposed to be essential services only, but I mean,
okay,
what do you classify as essential? So, but
yeah, it's funny. Like I think that changed more recently, but here during most of the pandemic, at least a large part of the first part of it, bars were considered essential services for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, like people are going to social distance and wear their masks all the time at bars. Totally.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were making that argument because they wanted the government was keeping the LCBO and the weed stores open as an essential service early on. Right.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're an alcoholic and you know what I mean, like, well, you're in lockdown too. Like, you know, I don't know. For those
Yeah.
that are extreme
I mean,
alcoholics.
you would want to. I can understand keeping the liquor stores open for that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like maybe people thought that it's better to keep bars open than it is for people to drink at home alone even more. So I mean, I don't know, but there are problems with everything that has been done too. Like I went to a restaurant for the first time in a long time recently, and some of the stuff they did was cool. Like instead of picking up a menu, they have like a little plastic coaster type of thing on the table, and then you scan it with your phone, and you can either bring up or download the menu and look on it that way. But you only have to wear a mask when you're walking to the table, and when you're getting up and walking away from it to go to the bathroom or to leave. But you don't have to wear a mask when you're at the table eating, and the waitress comes and she's wearing a mask too, but
Yeah.
you're still spreading your germs all over the place, even if you're maybe you're sitting far enough away from everyone else. But that just happened to be the case when we were in that restaurant. It could have easily not been the case.
No, I can't wrap that's the like early on when that shit started happening, like especially with restaurants, the whole you can sit down and take off your mask, but as soon as you stand up to go to the bathroom, you have to put your mask on. As soon as that shit happened, I was like, man, there is no other way to describe this than this is like fucking retarded, right?
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe this shit. And I know,
Yeah.
like we just talked about, I have a son with Down syndrome, and I shouldn't be using the R word or whatever, but it's so dumb to me that it's like there's no other way to describe it. Like, how does that prevent you from getting the germs at all?
It doesn't.
Right? Like, it doesn't. Like, and like, I don't know. What do science teachers though do? Like, can you imagine you're a science teacher and you know like the actual science behind this stuff, and you go to sit at a restaurant? Like, do you sit down and just be like, I don't know. Does this like blow your mind?
I think it probably depends on what your political ideology is.
Yeah, that's true too. But yeah, I don't know. That's just, I don't know. There's a lot of holes with that stuff. CBC did a video the other day where it compared like cloth masks and paper masks and then N95s, and they did all like the masks, and then they had the meter to show how much. And pretty much cloth masks and paper masks don't prevent shit. And N95s are the only kind of masks that actually do prevent anything. So,
oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, well, they still prevent something, but it's not like it's not a lot. Like
I think I myself and most people I've seen out and about seem to mostly be wearing cloth masks.
Yeah, I wear a cloth. Well, yeah, I wear a cloth mask all the time at like work and stuff like that. So, but yeah, apparently they don't do shit. But I don't know. We implemented our mask mandate in August of last. Like you can't go in a public place without wearing a mask right now. And yeah, our cases keep going up and up and up and up and up. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing we were talking about. I think before we started this, about how I've been kind of thinking and talking with friends about how obviously I'm just talking out of my ass here because I have no idea about the truth of the actual science. But I mean, it kind of seems to me like it's almost like the biggest factor is how large of a population there is where you're living. Like maybe there are way more COVID cases in bigger cities because there are just a hell of a lot more people.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's true. I think the highly populated areas got hit the hardest. Like New York City got really hit, probably the worst, right? And that's a highly densely populated area.
Mm-hmm.
Same with us right now in Ontario. I mean, Toronto's getting hit the worst. Peel region is getting hit the worst, and these are the most densely populated areas, that we have in Ontario. So, yeah.
It's so like everything we've been talking about, man. It's so complex, and there's so many factors involved, and people like oversimplify and ideologize it. all over the place. So it's so hard to figure out what is the most accurate, what is the closest to true.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I don't know, I'm like liberal and democratic on some stuff with COVID, and I'm Republican and conservative with other stuff with COVID. So, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So yeah, it's a complicated issue, and you can have arguments about everything. You can have arguments about the virus, where it originated, vaccines, vaccine passports. You could talk about. You could talk about government, you know, draconian laws that they implemented. You could talk about lockdowns. You could talk about masks. You could. There's so many debates to be had here, and honestly, it's like there's no real winner on either side. I think on any of these debates, right?
For sure.
So far,
like one thing that, like, for me, in terms of the lockdowns, for example, I agree that they should be happening. I would never be one of those people who would say, like, the lockdowns don't do anything and don't do them, even if they maybe do less than some people claim they do. I think they should happen, and people should wear masks and stuff like that. But it's like the point to which, like I was saying, the point to which people ideologize about it, and the thing that argues me is the point that I like, that I've seen, like, libertarians who I know we both follow, like, or libertarians or anarchists, like Michael Malice or Dave Smith, or I've seen Thaddeus Russell talk about this a lot too, is the authoritarianism of it is what bothers me. Like, we're going to take complete control of this populace, and it really annoys me, especially too, when other people are politicizing this so much that they're going around to people and, like, yelling at them, put a mask on, or some shit like that. Like, I think I told you before too about one of my close family members who, like, disowned me temporarily because I was still dating during COVID. Like, I'm not going out and partying and having sex with a different chick every night or some shit like that, like I used to do in my early 20s. I'm just still, like, dating chicks occasionally and stuff like that. But this person disowned me because it's dangerous for my mom, because I'm my mom's main caretaker, because she has so many serious health conditions. And, you know, what she thinks about it is that she knows that it's a risk, but she also understands that one thing that we've talked about before that's relevant in terms of this pandemic is mental health. You still need to be able to interact with people socially. Otherwise, it could, like, we've talked about before also about how there are rising suicide rates, rising rates of domestic abuse, rising rates of alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and all sorts of negative things can happen if you don't have some semblance of a social life still.
Yeah. There's a lot there. I don't, as far as lockdowns go, I mean, a year ago, I'd probably be on board with lockdowns. As time has gone on, though, I've slowly shifted over to I'd say more anti-lockdown at this point. I just, especially here in Ontario, we've gone to some really crazy stuff. And I think that ties into, like, the authoritarianism you were talking about too, with the government and its overreach of power. And this is where I kind of lean more conservative as far as government and interfering with my life. You know what I mean? Fire department, police, yes, but as far as, like, tell me how many people I should have in my house, like, are you serious? You know?
And like, one thing that was happening here that it seemed like most people just kind of decided to ignore was, apparently more recently they made tighter restrictions. So they made it that you can't even interact with anyone who's not in your family member. Like, you can't even have your cohort or bubble with one other person, like one other friend that you see or someone like that. But it seemed like most people were not obeying that anyway. And then they opened things up again anyway. And then they closed things down more again. And it's like, everyone I talk to, at least, so small sample size, of course, but everyone I've talked to at least is just like, they're just tired of this sort of thing. Like they pretty much have the same sort of attitude that I do. Like they understand that, you know, this is a dangerous disease. You need some lockdowns and masks and stuff, but there should be some better coordination than the way these things are done. And people exaggerate about some sort of shit, and it causes more problems than it solves sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Are you familiar with the Great Barrington Declaration?
No, what's that?
So the Great Barrington Declaration is and I'm smiling because it's like it's perceived as a right-wing kind of like group, but it's not. It's a group of doctors that have gotten together, and basically they've said, you know, keep your distance, wear a mask. Other than that, if you have like comorbidities, like let's say you're 70 years old and you have diabetes or heart failure, don't go out in public or whatever. But if you're like 20 years old and pure healthy, you know, go out, keep your distance, wear your mask, right? And this is the baseline that they've pretty much been promoting for the last year. And there's been a whole bunch of signatures from a bunch of physicians. It's online. You can Google it, Great Barrington Declaration. But anyway, I think that I think that they've been as close to right as somebody could in a scientific kind of realm and intellectual realm. And yet they've had like, you know, no exposure whatsoever. You know, mainstream media has kind of debunked them and said that this is just like, you know, some kind of whatever conspiracy theory. But yeah, I think there's a lot to COVID, but I think if there's anything good that's come out of COVID, because I always try to think like, what's the white pill here? You know, what's the positive here? I think that we've seen like a good breakdown because things are going to be changing a lot in the next like 10, 15 years with AI, you know, self-driving cars, Neuralink going to Mars, jobs, you know, there's a whole bunch of shit that we got to figure out. CRISPR technology, DNA straight. Going back to eugenics. There's a whole bunch of shit that we got to figure out, a whole bunch of hard questions coming our way. And I think it was good for us to kind of like have COVID, you know, be a good, like, not a test, but like it showed us that there's definitely cracks in government worldwide, not just here in Canada, but also the United States, also in Britain, also in France, also in, you know, other kind of westernized countries. A big breakdown of healthcare systems and a big breakdown of school, even like, you know,
yeah, man.
With unions, school teachers unions and that kind of stuff, you know, with kids going back to school and stuff like that. So all these big, like, you know, complex systems, school, government, police, even George Floyd, let's go. That was also thrown in the mix with the last year, right? So you also have like all these major kind of things that have been pretty much, you know, surrounded us our whole entire lives and have been like looked upon as rock and bedrock as iron. And, you know, the cops are like the shit. And now like people hate the fucking cops, right?
Yeah.
You know, people, the government was like semi like trustable and that kind of shit. Now nobody likes the government at all. People like, I remember watching CNN on 9/11. Now CNN is fucking garbage, right? Like nobody trusts a word that CNN says, right? So all these institutions have broke down a lot over the last like 5 years for sure, which I'm leaning more towards it being a good thing, because I think these things needed to happen in order for us to change culturally as a society into the next kind of like, you know, the next jump in our lifetime. And I'm not like talking no great reset shit. I'm just saying like whatever that the next thing is, right? We got to figure out some shit.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even totally know what the Great Reset is. I kind of like avoided learning about that.
Yeah, so the Great Reset has been like a conspiracy. I guess it's a conspiracy theory. I didn't really go down the rabbit hole too much, but Time Magazine wrote, or was it Time Magazine? But apparently there's been a big push for the Great Reset. Even like Trudeau was talking about we have to do a Great Reset. And there's been a bunch of people like world leaders that have, you know, they've all been touting the same phrase. Like I'm sure you've heard build back better.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. There's somebody made a video the other day on YouTube where it was like, it took like all these world leaders, Trudeau, Biden, Angela Merkel, the crazy guy in UK, whatever his name is. But anyway, they all say big build back better, you know.
Oh, okay.
And they've all mentioned like Great Reset, and it's pretty much from what I gather. And again, I didn't go down the rabbit hole too much here. I just know a little bit about it, but it's basically to reset us as a society. It sounds like communism light, you know, like our diet version of it, where everybody's like AI controls and Amazon ships everything out to your house all the time, and you know you don't really have a job.
Maybe I've heard about something like this. I might have heard one of my friends describing something like this, and my reaction was that sounds like something Alex Jones would say.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, to be honest. I mean, you would have to shift a lot of every Western culture in order for everybody to be on board with some kind of great global reset, right? So
I don't think there are I don't think there are anywhere near enough people who actually want that. Like, I think most people it kind of seems like there's a massive overrepresentation in all forms of media, even like online alternative media, about how radical how many people actually are super radical and want to totally restructure everything in society.
Yeah, no, I don't think a majority of people do want to do that. I would say that a lot of people want to do reform of all these institutions, like cops, for example, you know, a huge reform there, huge reform on government and how much, you know, controls they have over us as far as like, you know, virus control, huge reform on healthcare, you know, everything, man, even the financial system. I mean, all this, you know, inflation is going to be fucking crazy over the next couple of years. Gas is going to be outrageous. They even saying lumber is at an extremely high rate right now, right?
Yeah.
So
more people. That means like here in Fort McMurray, where there's a massive oil industry, that means that a whole bunch of people are going to get rehired and get their jobs back. So it'll be good for people here, but bad for people for the regular economy.
Yeah, there's going to be, like I said, I think we're going through this kind of like this, you know, where things are changing. Well, yeah, we're changing at a really fast rate, right? And probably more fast than a lot of our brains can keep up with. I mean, unless you've kind of kept up culturally with, you know, shit on a daily basis and red height, you know, it's a lot of the shit would catch you off guard, right? So, yeah, like the average normie and like my parents have no idea about, you know.
Yeah, even like but I'm gonna release a video in a few days about that because I like to make videos about culture war stuff sometimes, just because I find it hilariously entertaining. So I'm gonna make a video in a few days about that Lil Nas X twerking on Satan and making a Satan shoe thing that people are getting all mad about. And I was telling my friend about that when we went for a walk the other day, and she was like, "Who is Lil Nas X, and what is this to do with a Satan shoe?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, you don't know about this stupid culture war shit that people are raging out about."
Yeah, I'm jealous. I don't know why, but my brain, like, I don't know. I listen to podcasts and I watch YouTube and I do a bunch of like.
This is like what almost always happens. I avoid learning about something that I think, oh man, this is going to be a waste of brain space. And then I get constantly bombarded of it. The stupid fucking algorithms work on me sometimes, man. And like I was scrolling through YouTube and I saw, oh, it's the new Lil Nas X video. I can see what all the fuss is about. I'm like, oh, okay, he's getting his sexual freak on. Who cares?
Yeah,
like let his freak flag fly, man.
Yeah, I don't go down like cultural arguments. You know what's going on with like Little Nas X and what's going on with like Disney or what's going on with the latest cancellation. I mean I read headlines on that stuff. I don't go deep in the articles with that shit just because I just know it's just like. I don't know. It's some of it is worth the fight. Some of it is not worth the fight. Some of it is.
That's why I try to avoid it most of the time.
Yeah, I try to avoid it most of the time. There's some shit that pisses me off and some shit that I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah. I guess it depends on the battle. Like, I don't know how I can compare it, but I don't know. I don't even know there's been so many people who've been canceled lately. I can't even keep up with half this shit all the time. Like it
Yeah,
was
it's so funny. Too.
MLB. I don't know. They just canceled their All-Star game or whatever, right? So I've been keeping up with
Oh
that
yeah,
because I'm a fan of baseball. But if you ask me who the latest celebrity is that got canceled, I have no idea because I don't care
oh
about
yeah,
celebrities, right? So
yeah, me neither. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think I'm cool with ending it here if you are, man.
Yeah, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
All
we
right.
went like all over the place on
Oh
topics,
yeah.
which we
Well,
usually do.
we always do.
Yeah.
But we got on to some relevant topics that led to another one, and then another one, and then another one. That's always how the tangents start.
Yeah, no,
Well, I mean, most of them were related to eugenics in some way, right? Like abortion is related to eugenics. You could say COVID is too in some ways if you believe like really extremist interpretations about how bad lockdowns are. If you're of the like Alex Jones type or some shit like that.
yeah,
And and we were talking about religion and government too, and government has a lot to do with eugenics because it was it was the Nazi government technically who did all that eugenics in World War II and like all over North America where it happened as well, and people get like religiously political about it, as Jonathan Haidt would point out. I would say too.
yeah.
Yeah,
Lots of pro-choice versus pro-life arguments
exactly.
with all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, yeah, I'll say all the stuff I like to say at the end of my videos here, and then you
Yeah,
can
man.
give any last words or plugs there. And so, yeah, thanks again to everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed our very all over the place conversation about eugenics and a lot of related topics. And look forward to also, I believe, on Sunday we're gonna do a movie chat about John Wick, right? With
Yeah.
you and Dusty, and I think Shizan's gonna join too, so that'll be fun. And got more podcasts coming up too. And like I said, I'm gonna make a video about that Lil Nas X stuff because I think it's hilarious. And I'm gonna keep doing my book series on those books like Jordan Peterson's new book Beyond Order, and Emma Goldman's book Anarchism and Other Essays, and Slavoj Žižek's book on Hegel called Less Than Nothing, and Foucault's History of Sexuality, and all the others. And yeah, thanks to everyone who subscribed to the channel. Click that like button on the video and comment on some of these crazy Nazi things that we were saying, and get all raged about it. And also give me money on Patreon, which I would greatly appreciate more than anything else, of course. And I'll put the link for that in the description of this video. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And try to understand other people's perspectives and chill out a little bit. And, we're all human beings, man. All right. Anything else to say there, Chris?
Yeah, I hope you don't get demonetized for us talking about.
Yeah, I haven't even been monetized yet.
No, well, hey,
No.
there's a plus.
You need like a certain number. I think you need 1,000 subscribers, and I think I have 164 right now. So I'm slowly gaining more, but I'm nowhere near 1,000 yet. So I hope to be monetized though. But,
give you some street cred. Yeah, I've been demonetized, yo.
Well, I want to eventually be able to make a living from this sort of thing, because that would be fucking awesome. But yeah,
that would be sweet, man. And yeah, some of those YouTubers, man, like Mr. Beast, like that guy makes fucking millions of dollars off this shit.
Yeah, I don't need anywhere near that much money. Just any amount of money that could qualify as making a living, that would be fucking awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me online, Twitter. My handle is Styles, Styeleiles. Yeah, I got
That's on Instagram too, right?
it's on Instagram too.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, I got some music I'm gonna be releasing soon, so I'll link it in Twitter or whatever. But yeah.
Cool. All right, check it out. And yeah, talk to you again on Sunday about John Wick.
Yeah, man.
Thanks everyone again for watching, and adios until next time.